All right, so let's just jump in and dive in. Let's begin with the state of Facebook today. There have been so many revelations. Frances Haugen, Facebook whistleblower, the Wall Street Journal's Facebook Files report, just to name two. What do we know now about Facebook that we didn't know just 3 weeks ago?
I mean, a lot. And also not so much. Sort of interesting. I think one thing that I have really been struck by is the degree to which Facebook's internal research really lines up, frankly, with what my research has found, with what the research of a lot of other folks who work in this space have been, sort of telling us for years. I think what I have been kind of struck by, and something that has really shifted my perspective on Facebook a lot, is that, again, we've been saying some things like this for years about the sort of scale of various problems on the platform. And Facebook has mostly sort of said, well, you don't really have the whole picture. There's more context. And, what we know now is actually that their own internal research has been telling them a lot of these same things for years. Mm-hmm. They have been aware of these problems, and they actually understand them much better than we do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Some of the revelations really do seem like sort of these perhaps creates a tipping point for what Facebook will do next.
I mean, I hope so. I mean, I think it really feels to me like we've crossed a threshold that, the status quo is not sustainable. Facebook can't do nothing. And then the question is change going to be prompted only by federal regulation, or is Facebook going to start making some changes to how their platform works in advance of that? I actually think at this point, there's no way there isn't going to be federal regulation of some kind. I think it's more a question of, how long that will take and what exactly that will look like.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Agreed, and optimistically so. Let's take a step back and talk about your work. So you're a researcher that studies online political communication, and Facebook recently shut down your account. Can you tell us about the Ad Observer? How does it work? What happened?
Yes. So Facebook shut down my account and the account of Damon McCoy and of Paul Duke, our lead engineer, in I guess like 2 months ago. How time flies. And what Facebook says is that they did this because of our browser extension, Ad Observer. Ad Observer is a plugin that users can install. You can, it's still working. You can go to adobserver.org right now and install it for Chrome or Firefox. And when you do that, whenever you are shown an ad on either Facebook or YouTube, that ad will be collected, and it will be, along with the ad targeting, I should say, and it will be sort of scrubbed of any potentially identifying information, and it will be sent back to our servers. We compile all those ad observations into, we sort of pull out, here's the unique ad, and we compile sort of summary statistics. We evaluate, we identify the ads that are political, and then we publish the political ads for other researchers to use.
Amazing.
We do have, I should just mention, that's not the only piece of work we do. We also do work trying to better understand organic political communication in particular. So we are interested in both ads and how ads can be used to, manipulate people, to be frank. And we also look at information in organic content more broadly.
Got it. And what has your research surfaced regarding political ads and mis and disinformation?
I mean, one of the things I think that was really illuminating about Ad Observer, and, something that I think, speaks to the importance of this type of project, is that one of the things we've learned is that Facebook is really not, does not do a great job identifying political ads. So Facebook make a tool called the Political Ad Library API available to researchers. And this is something that we use heavily. And it's pretty good. And I want to give Facebook credit here. It's definitely better than what's made available by, for example, Google. But one of the things we were trying to understand is how complete is the Facebook political ad library?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing is that in order to evaluate that, you need to have ads. You need to know which ads are not included as well as which ones are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of question that Ad Observer has allowed us to answer.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the rate here differs. I should say in the United States, Facebook certainly does a lot better than they do overseas. In the United States, they seem to catch around about a little shy of 90% of political ads they catch. So, you know, that's not too bad. I think the problem is more overseas where they miss a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Got it. Interesting. So since Facebook, closed your account, what other sort of actions have they taken that have impacted, your work and really broadly independent research, academic freedom?
Yeah, that's a good question, because this isn't just about us. I think this is a problem for the whole research community. So I think of Facebook's actions against researchers as sort of falling into two buckets. One, Facebook seems to be taking the stance that research that isn't under its control is problematic, and they've been attempting to shut down researchers who do want to be fully independent of the platform and its tools. So obviously that applies to projects like Ad Observer, but it also applies to things like Algorithm Watch in Germany. And I think that's frankly a scarier example of how, Facebook doesn't have to sue small research outfits. It can just threaten to sue, and that can be enough. We're incredibly lucky to have great legal representation and great support from NYU, but not all researchers are that lucky to have that degree of support. So Algorithm Watch actually had to completely shut down. They shut down their project because of a cease and desist letter that they got from Facebook. I think that's incredibly concerning. There are other projects. The one that's coming to mind right now is Unfollow Everything. That is more of that is a tool that used to allow people to automatically unfollow their entire Facebook news feed so that they could proactively re-add people that they really did want to follow. That was being used to conduct research on newsfeed, on the Facebook newsfeed, and how it impacted users. That's been shut down, unfortunately, again, in the face of these cease and desist letters. But I'd say there's another class that I think is frankly, just equally concerning. Facebook, like I've said, I think Facebook does deserve some credit for making more data available to researchers than Google does, or than certainly platforms like TikTok do. But, the data they make available is often structured in such a way that researchers can ask very specific questions, and they can't really ask questions about Facebook. So I'm thinking about CrowdTangle, for example. CrowdTangle is a great tool. Very few researchers have access to it. It's incredibly restricted on the research front. Business users, if you are a content creator, it's very easy to get access to CrowdTangle. And it's because, Facebook is perfectly willing to make CrowdTangle data, which, to be clear, is it's about public content on Facebook. So it's about public posts, public organic content. There really are no privacy issues with that kind of data set. And Facebook makes it widely available to content creators to help them learn how to better engage with Facebook audiences, but it won't make that data available to researchers. And the data sets it does make available to researchers through efforts like Social Science One, again, are heavily vetted. It's very difficult to get access to data through those programs. And again, that data is often structured in such a way that you can ask questions about about advertisers, or you can ask questions about specific bad actors, but you can't really ask questions about Facebook. And even these tools, some of the things we've been learning over the last couple of months is that there were huge flaws where massive amounts of data was incorrectly excluded from those data sets. And it was done in a biased way that, kind of ruined several researchers, years and years of their work. So I think that's where, those are the two big areas where I think it's just getting really, really hard as a researcher to work on these kinds of problems.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. That's a really fascinating and terrifying sort of set of examples that you provided. So one is really the chilling effect of intimidating researchers, and the second would be really limiting access to data specifically to researchers. All right, shifting gears and sort of zooming out a little bit. So last week you testified before Congress on a hearing titled "The Disinformation Black Box: Researching Social Media Data." In your testimony, you outlined 3 policy approaches and recommendations. Could you speak to those?
Yeah, so, like I said, I do think we are at this point where, we just need legislation. And so the 3 policy proposals we are coming forward with are really built around better transparency. These are not the only things we need. These are not really the ultimate solutions to harms on the platform, but we do think that transparency is the first step toward building those solutions that we need. But right now we just don't quite know what those are. So the first thing that we're proposing is universal ad transparency. I have a preprint of a paper that will be released hopefully before the end of the year about how all ads from all major digital ad platforms can be made transparent safely in a way that doesn't compromise user privacy. So I think universal ad transparency is the first step, but it is not enough. I think one of the things that we are all learning is how dangerous these content promotion algorithms can be. That they do, that particularly ones that focus on user engagement, which to be fair is almost all of them, that they do really have the potential to harm users, to harm user safety. And I think that's why we need much more public transparency of public data on the platform. And when I say public data, I mean data that is meaningfully public, data that gets not just minimal engagement, data that gets serious engagement. That's something that's another paper in the works, coming up with those definitions. But I think in general, this is something that, again, that we can do in a pretty safe way while protecting user privacy. And a lot of why I think this is doable is this isn't actually a huge shift from the situation we're in right now. So Facebook has, as I mentioned earlier, a tool called CrowdTangle, where they make public data available to to content creators on the platform, as well as a limited number of researchers. Twitter has what's often referred to as the Firehose API, which is, again, a way for anyone who wants to buy it to get access to public Twitter data. So I think those are two examples of the kind of place we need to get to where there is public access to meaningfully public data. And then the third thing I think we need that is going to be really important is a researcher safe harbor law. So, you were asking me earlier about, what are the threats from Facebook to researchers? And, these legal threats really do stop work. And we're just talking about the folks who have been stopped. I know of at least a dozen researchers who are just not starting on projects because the legal landscape is, it's not actually that fraught. Like, I'm actually quite confident that the work I do is entirely legal. However, in the absence of a researcher safe harbor law, these cease and desist letters, even if they are entirely frivolous, really do have the ability to stop research in its tracks. And so that's why we need an explicit law saying that, good faith researchers who are following best practices around data handling and respecting user privacy, that their work is explicitly legal and allowed. I think that would go a long way toward enabling the kind of research that we need to get to a point where we do have concrete solutions.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Thank you for sharing those. Absolutely. And perhaps that would protect against, the intimidation tactics that we've seen. A quick follow-up question on that universal ad transparency policy. Would you say that that's a way to sort of create a proxy, almost algorithmic transparency or audit too?
So I think it would certainly be a first step. I think that the data that we are asking for to be made transparent, we specifically ask for data about targeting. We specifically will be asking for data about user impressions. These are the kinds of things we would need to better understand how content promotion algorithms and how ad targeting platforms function. However, they aren't going to be all we need. This is something that Nate Persily out of Stanford has thought a lot about, how we do something similar to better understand how all of this functions with non-public data. Because content promotion algorithms, they're pulling from a wide range of content. They can show you ads, they can show you public content, they can show you content that's only visible to you. And there is a large pool of harmful content that doesn't have a public visibility. And we do need a way to better understand how content promotion algorithms operate with that kind of content as part of understanding how they function, in the whole. So, there is more work here that needs to be done if we're going to get to the point where we can audit how content promotion algorithms work. But I really think of that as more of that's one of the ultimate solutions I think we're moving toward, because we do need a way to audit how social media companies promote content. And when I say promote, I don't mean advertise. I mean, content promotion algorithms choose from a wide range of things to show people, and they show them things in general that the algorithm thinks they will find the most engaging. And what we are learning is that engagement is inherently in tension with user safety, right? Because misinformation is engaging, harmful content is engaging. And so given that it seems like an inherent risk to users, I think we need to move towards some framework where we can audit how those algorithms work and provide the public with some degree of confidence that these platforms are safe. But figuring out exactly what that audit would look like, I think that's where we need more transparency to be able to answer that question.
Absolutely. And just to level set for folks in the audience, so that was user engagement that Laura is talking about. These are clicks, likes, shares, comments, algorithms that are designed to promote user engagement in ways that can be quantified and sort of built into algorithmic systems. Okay, so taking a step back and talking about academic freedom and increased transparency, why is supporting independent researchers like yourself a really imperative and integral part into creating that healthier social media ecosystem, or really creating transparency? Essentially, how can we make sure that researchers like you are integral as a lot of these policy conversations take place, in government, in academia, amongst industry? How can we make sure that,
No, it's a good question. And I think it's a tricky one, because with all of these, things that we're talking about, laws, regulations, the devil's in the details, and the details really do matter. Like I said, a lot of what I'm focused on is transparency that doesn't violate user privacy, but there certainly are there are real areas of concern. And I think that's where, it is really vital that folks that do understand, how PII functions, what the important principles are for making sure that, okay, data can't be, that, users can't be re-identified, right? That there aren't like statistical losses of privacy when you combine data sets, right? These are the kinds of issues that, computer scientists and technical people have been grappling with for years and do understand. And I think if those people are not part of those conversations, we are going to wind up with regulation that isn't workable. In terms of how we make sure those people at the table, I'm working on it. I think it's something that, in general, I think Congress gets a lot of flack for being not technically savvy, and I think that there is. I think things are much better than Congress's reputation would maybe lead you to believe. Like I talk to folks in government. Many people in government have tech fellows that that explicitly make sure that members of Congress are educated on technical issues. The program I'm thinking of that drives people is called Tech Congress, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a PhD and you want to serve in government, there are programs for that. But I think in general, this is something we're all just going to have to make sure we put our shoulders to the wheel to do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. All right. We're going to take a bit more of a step back, and we have a few minutes left in our conversation, so I want to leave a little bit of time to take a question or two from the audience. So as we're a university consortium, and we have a lot of students in our community. So you previously worked as a software engineer at Palantir and FactSet. So how have those experiences in industry, perhaps in aggregate, influenced your research and your work?
That's a good question. I will say that having been a software engineer in industry was tremendously helpful in my academic life, just because when it came time to build software, I know how to do that. I know how to build, and more, I know how to build like structures that work. Like we have monitoring and we have logging and we have, we don't do releases on Fridays, right? There's a lot of just practices of being in a software company that are very helpful for, in academia, if you want to do software related projects. So I would say that while that transition was a little, was certainly a little bit rocky in the sense that I'd been out of school for a while when I went back. My skills certainly were incredibly helpful when it came to my research. In terms of values, honestly, my experiences in the tech industry are a big part of why I do the work I do, because I was concerned about the impact my work was having on the world, and I didn't think it was necessarily positive. I think I am the last person that would suggest that anyone, just, find what you love and do that. You got to get paid. But I think that there are, you also don't have to do work that you find is in conflict with your values. And I think there is a middle ground there.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Wise words. All right. Let's take a moment and see if we have questions from our audience. I'm actually having a hard time getting some of this. All right, we're seeing some comments in the chat. 90% is not good enough when discussing massive scale. I think that's in reference to the misinformation, the US misinformation, 90% statistical error. And then Well, folks, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat. I'm seeing one from Roger. How effective can we be at auditing algorithms like Facebook's?
That's a good question. And I think just someone who I think has thought a lot about this is Kathy O'Neill. She's a researcher based out of New York, who really has spent a lot of time writing and working and thinking about how one would audit machine learning algorithms. And I think that fundamentally, where I would start with this is we have this question, which is how, I want to know for Facebook's content promotion algorithm, I want to know how much does it promote various categories of harmful content? How much does it promote content that is not harmful, that is maybe beneficial or helpful? And I want to know like, how does it change the underlying information ecosystem, right? Because if you think about Facebook as like a big soup with lots of different types of content in it, I really want to know how the content promotion algorithm changes the composition of that soup. And I would like to understand, how much bad stuff is in there when that content promotion algorithm is done, and maybe how much was in there to begin with too. That might be useful. So I really think about it in those terms. The user safety aspects seem to me to be the most important. There are probably many others, right? And there probably is a balance here between, there's probably some scale at which content is, is maybe like negative, but not all the way harmful. But these are the kinds of questions we don't know what the right questions are yet, because we just know so little about what content is on the platform. And that's really why I think transparency is the first step.
Thanks, Laura. I love that recipe example. Absolutely. It's like, we need to know if there's cyanide in our soup. All right. So we actually are out of time, unfortunately. But I'd like to take a moment and say, Laura, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for your intrepid research. And on behalf of the NYC Media Lab team, thank you for being with us today, taking the time. We are excited to support you as you continue doing incredible work. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.